The 80s, which are often regarded as one of the greatest eras for anime and manga, saw a major shift in the type of stories that were being told. It saw an influx of stories set in dystopian landscapes both in the future and the past. This isn't to say that these stories didn't exist at all prior to this time period, but the late 80s were defined by these animes, which were filled with horror, violence, and gore. Some of the most notable anime/manga that laid down the foundation for the future and defined this era include Akira 1988, MD Geist 1986, Angel Cop 1989, Violence Jack 1986, and Fist of the North Star in 1984. These shows would lay the foundation for what was arguably the golden age of anime/manga in the 90s. Many of them, like Akira and Fist of the North Star, would go on to garner critical mainstream acclaim, cementing their status as juggernauts in the industry. Just to put things into context, we wouldn't have gotten shows like Berserk if these shows from the 80s didn't exist, as Kentaro Miura drew a lot of inspiration from shows of this era, especially Violence Jack. This was an era of legendary anime that even permeates our current pop culture as part of memes like the
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
line from Hokuro Shinken
It's over 9,000!
from Dragon Ball Z. Violence Jack is a product of this mythical era, and we feel it's long overdue for its day in the sun, having been such an influential manga. It's an excellent example of the manga/anime of that era, pushing boundaries and telling stories in an extremely unconventional way. Violence Jack is an anime and manga series written by mangaka Go Nagai, who's most famous for his work with the Devilman franchise. The author worked on a series of one-shot stories along with several serializations of the title from 1973 to 1990. It's a legendary anime/manga that is widely regarded as the pioneer of the post-apocalyptic genre. The series would see a part of the story animated into 3 original video animations, or OVAs, titled Violence Jack, Harlem Bomber, Violence Jack, Evil Town, and Violence Jack, Hell's Wind. These 3 titles would come out in 1986, 1988, and 1990 respectively, and would do a good job of faithfully rendering the impact of the manga. Set in a violent and dystopian world where anarchy reigns supreme, it must have been quite a shock to the senses of the audience to witness such a brutal, unabashed rendition of a post-apocalyptic world in an anime for the first time. The show pulls no punches with its themes, and it's definitely not one for the squeamish or faint of heart. It combines tropes of horror and the supernatural in a perfect blend and delivers the audience a product that's so unique, you have to see it to believe it. The manga/anime follows the story of the people living in this dystopian world and the effect that encountering its titular character, Violence Jack, has upon them. Jack is an enigma that can be likened to a force of nature, or perhaps even the spirit of vengeance that prowls the wastelands of Kanto, Japan. Where Jack walks, death follows, especially for the wicked. That too in the most violent and destructive way imaginable. The story also has close ties to the Devilman series by Go Nagai, which we'll discuss in the video later. In today's video though, we explore not only the first ever post-apocalyptic anime/manga, but also perhaps one of the first characters to embody the anti-hero archetype in all of manga and anime. So get your bags packed and make sure you're well prepared, because we're embarking on a journey to the godforsaken wasteland of Kanto, Japan, the domain of Violence Jack. What is the origin of Violence Jack? Sometime in the near future, Earth is hit by a comet that devastates the entire world. Nowhere is the destruction felt more than in the Kanto region of Japan, where the actual impact occurs. The comet's impact causes widespread earthquakes and changes in natural phenomena. The earthquake is referred to as the Hellquake by the survivors of this devastation, and it has caused all the cities in Kanto to sink underground. Those who survived the devastation form their own community, both on the surface and underground, to survive in this wasteland. With the breakdown in society, forces of anarchy and chaos begin to emerge, raping, murdering, pillaging, and laying waste to all that lie in their path. Almost as if in reply to the disturbance in the balance of good and evil due to the rampant increase in evil caused by the destruction of society as we know it, Violence Jack appears. One day, during a digging expedition conducted by a group of men who belonged to one of the many factions of humans called Zone A, who lived in an underground settlement called Evil Town, they stumble upon a gigantic human while looking for what they considered to be an air source and a way to the surface. He's quite literally buried behind a rock wall and, upon being dug out, shows no signs of injury or hunger. He does have amnesia though, and he can't remember his name, so he calls himself Violence Jack after his weapon of choice, the jackknife, and his violent nature. While he initially joins the men to aid them in their survival, he leaves them to join Zone C, a group entirely comprised of women who request that he protect them. There's no explanation as to where he comes from in the OVA, though the ending of the manga would make him a reincarnation of Akira Furo, Fudo, a character from Go Nagai's other series, Devilman. He's supposed to be one part of the 3 other characters that form Devilman, but this is later abandoned as Violence Jack became its own line of stories in Shin Violence Jack, but for all intents and purposes, we will not take this retcon into consideration. What does Violence Jack look like? Jack is shown to be a hulking human who towers at a height of approximately 10 feet. He is extremely muscular and wears tattered sleeveless coats and regular trousers with boots. His torso is wrapped with bandages along with his forearms. He is also seen wearing a yellow scarf across his neck in the anime adaptation. Violence Jack's appearance is more akin to a beast at times, with his hair growing like a mane and covering most of his face. His teeth resemble that of a wolf and are jagged, becoming even more pronounced when he goes into his feral state. His eyes too start to burn with an unearthly fire, lending him a demonic look. Jack retains this look throughout the series. One can forgive him though, as he's the only being who seems to be keeping the forces of chaos from completely overtaking this already dead world. Not to mention the fact that finding a barber, especially one that wouldn't slit his throat in this world full of anarchy and evil, is a pretty tough ask, even for Violence Jack. What is Jack's personality and motivation? The character of Violence Jack is difficult to pinpoint exactly. While he's a hulking mass of rage and violence, as his name suggests, we're not given an indication of what his true motivations are. We know that he's not evil, as he's seen coming to punish the various lowlives that inhabit the wasteland for harming or seeking to harm the weak and the innocent. This is seen on several occasions, like when he decides to side with the women of Zone C and protects them as they're being sexually assaulted before helping them escape. He's also seen helping the denizens of a small peaceful settlement called Hopetown from an evil biker gang called the Hell's Wind. Jack is described by his enemies as an angel of death, and he really seems to appear seemingly out of nowhere to destroy the various villains infesting this world. He seems to have a sixth sense of sorts that attracts him to areas of extreme violence and depravity. Oftentimes, he appears too late to save the unfortunate individuals, but it is cathartic to see him lay waste to the guilty party. Even though he's shown displaying extreme levels of violence and turning into a beast incarnate, he is seen having a larger sense of justice. He doesn't at any point attack the innocent or the weak. Sometimes we're given the impression that his crusade seems to be geared more towards the disposal of evil creatures than actually saving people, and the people he does save just seems to be a positive side effect of him doing his job. His character and personality are perhaps meant to be the great equalizer in a world where the survival of the fittest reigns supreme and the strong consume the weak. Towards the end, it's revealed that Violence Jack is the reincarnation of Akira Fudo, the Devilman, and is fated to battle Ryo Asuka, aka Satan from the Devilman manga/anime, who, in this universe, is the Slum King. Slum King is the overarching villain of the series and Jack's arch nemesis. This revelation, of course, cruises over the heads of people who have never read or watched Devilman. With the overall disjointed nature of the plot and the massive twist right at the end, it's safe to say Jack doesn't have an overarching motivation other than to vanquish all evil in Kanto and destroy Slum King. He's merciless to his enemies and exactly the opposite when it comes to the innocent, especially women. He's also seen warming up a child who decides to become stronger to protect the weak in this world. This is probably the only instance in which we see Jack truly smiling from his heart. It's a silver lining to his character that gives it some much needed depth and makes him more than just a freak of nature with a penchant for violence. What are Jack's attributes and abilities? Superhuman strength. Towering at close to 10 feet in height and being built like a tank, it's not a surprise that Jack possesses superhuman strength. It's also to be noted that when we say the term superhuman, we don't use it lightly. He's quite literally that strong. We get a taste of this strength in the anime when he single-handedly destroys a gang of hoodlums from Zone C of Evil Town. In his very first fight, the man literally kicks a motorbike along with its rider into the ceiling, giving us an immediate understanding that those muscles aren't merely for show. He's shown to be able to decapitate and rip off the limbs of his foes with his bare hands. Imagine the strength required to do that. Not even a seasoned bodybuilder would be able to pull off such a feat, or such an arm. If that weren't enough, Jack can be seen preventing an airborne helicopter from flying away. He then proceeds to swing the same helicopter as if he were firing a slingshot and flings it at his enemy with just one arm. He then proceeds to break off the primary rotor and uses it as a blade to impale his foe, repeatedly showing no mercy and killing him. In another instance, he leaps from the ground, grabbing an airborne helicopter once again, and this time, instead of a slingshot, he uses it as a javelin and throws it to its destruction. We don't know what he has against motorbikes and helicopters because in another scene, he literally grabs 3 motorbikes that were charging him, along with their riders, mid-flight, using his biceps before tossing them away like he's throwing away a piece of cardboard. Even nature seems to bend beneath his ungodly strength as he's seen being able to burrow through asphalt and concrete with his bare hands to launch a surprise attack. Finally, as one final testament to his superhuman strength, he single-handedly takes on Mad Saurus' devil form. Mad Saurus in this form looks like a demon and is quite clearly something supernatural. In this form, the villain has enhanced speed, strength, and agility, far exceeding any mortal. Yet Violence Jack is seen being able to keep up with him, even managing to overpower and kill Saurus eventually. Inhuman speed and agility. When you see Violence Jack in action, it's easy to just end up focusing on his raw power due to his obvious size and the feats of strength he performs. What most people fail to notice or simply forget, much like his unfortunate enemies, is that the man is insanely fast. He's seen taking out multiple enemies in the blink of an eye on several occasions. A lot of the time, these enemies don't even know what hit them. In his fight against Saurus, he is, for the most part, able to keep up with the monster's speed, dodging attacks made against him with an ungodly display of agility. Jack is even seen almost catching up to a speeding motorcycle by simply sprinting. It's not so much about his speed being astounding as much as it's about someone of his size being capable of such speeds. He has a vertical leap which makes him capable of high jumping high enough to grab a helicopter mid-flight. When he's fighting tougher opponents like Slum King, Harlem Bomber, or Mad Saurus, he's seen demonstrating an extraordinary agility that he normally doesn't have to rely on while facing smaller fries. If you're his enemy, it must be a truly terrifying prospect to face someone who can move with the speed and agility of a cheetah along with the strength of a bear. Durability and resistance to pain. Throughout the series, Violence Jack is seen withstanding blows and attacks that would prove fatal to almost every other human being. In the Evil Town saga, he is seen being clawed out viciously by Mad Saurus and losing a heavy amount of blood. Despite this, he continues to fight and slays the monster. Jack is also seen getting his fingers sliced off and one of his arms severed by the Harlem Bomber, yet not so much as a whimper escapes his lips. Instead, he once again continues to fight and even manages to hurl a helicopter with his remaining hand at his foe. He's also blinded in one eye by a throwing knife, and guess what he does? He simply plucks it from his eye and throws it back before continuing on his way. Like that wasn't enough, Jack literally channels lightning through his body, which has no adverse effect on him. He can also withstand a twister that is shown to be powerful enough to strip concrete from fallen structures. During the Hellwind saga, the man literally tanks a suicide attack by a biker who crashes headlong into him with a grenade attached to his crotch. While the biker dies, which is only to be expected, Jack simply stands there with only his coat being burnt off his back. He's also seen facing an entire firing squad of enemies with machine guns and getting absolutely peppered by bullets. Needless to say, when it comes to Jack, he survives once again. He's also shown to be fireproof as he marches on his enemies engulfed in flame, and while they succumb to it, the flames have no effect on his body. One of the bigger testaments to his durability, often forgotten by many, is that Jack was buried under heavy rubble for months before he was discovered after the earthquake that rocked Kanto. During this time, he had no water, food, or even air for that matter, not to mention all the weight of the rubble crushing him from all sides. Yet he walks out of there as if he's going for an evening stroll. There are really no limits to his durability at this point. It seems unless he were to be atomized completely, there's no stopping him. His ungodly durability is one of the primary reasons why he's likened to an angel of death or an unstoppable force of nature by his enemies. Healing factor. We've already gone through the monstrous strength, agility, and durability that this giant of a man possesses. We've also spoken about the feats he has performed thanks to these attributes. If you thought we were done listing how much of a broken character Jack is, think again. As if being able to run as fast as a motorcycle, or throwing a helicopter like a javelin, or even surviving being shot by a firing squad wasn't enough, the man is able to heal and regenerate virtually any sort of injury. Unlike the healing and regenerative powers of characters like Deadpool or Wolverine that we've grown accustomed to, Violence Jack's healing factor, if you can even call it that, is very different. We aren't given a clear-cut answer to how, despite being shot, burned, and dismembered, he keeps coming back good as new. It is only during the Hellwind saga that we see how he heals from his injuries. During the Hellwind saga, as mentioned earlier, he loses one of his eyes along with his fingers and an arm. Towards the end of the episode, there's a storm brewing in the background, and he raises his jackknife to channel the lightning through his body, which results in him regenerating his eyes along with his lost limbs. He basically recovers from the bullet wounds he suffers at the hands of the Hell's Wind gang overnight. Our belief is that the nature of his regeneration and his healing factor is magical in nature, tied to him actually being Devilman himself. What are his different forms? Violence Jack's different forms are a tad bit more complicated than the usual power-up transformations one might be accustomed to in anime or manga. When we talk about the different forms of Jack, we're mostly talking about separated entities that are a part of Jack. They're not alternate personalities, these are living, breathing individuals who coexist at the same time as Jack, but are his different forms. Let's briefly explore these entities now so that hopefully you get a clearer picture of it at the end. Feral form. While Jack in his normal form already resembles an animal to a degree, this likeness is only increased 100-fold when he's in combat. He starts emanating an aura filled with bloodlust, with his eyes turning more beast-like. His teeth start to appear even more jagged with multiple rows of fangs, and his eyes turn red as if flaming in fury. There's no escaping Jack in this form, as he becomes a veritable berserker who will stop at nothing to eradicate the evil before him. All of his attributes level up massively in this form, making him extra durable, stronger, and faster. In his battle against Mad Saurus, the villain, upon witnessing his violent red aura, recognizes him as a fellow monster. This has allowed him to garner a reputation amongst the denizens of Kanto as an enigma who suddenly appears and leaves death and destruction in his wake, destroying evil wherever he goes. Lady Jack. Throughout the series, we come across the mysterious woman who bears something of a resemblance to Jack. Her appearance is wild-looking, and she's normally very scantily clad. She's extremely strong and has a no-nonsense personality akin to Jack. Lady Jack also seems to possess magic powers, as she can transform herself to look like an old woman or turn into a rabbit. She seems to have attributes similar to Jack's and shares his regenerative powers. At the end of the series, she merges with Jack and becomes a part of him, revealing her true identity. It's speculated that she's the representation of Jack, who himself is Akira Fudo's reincarnation's feminine and nurturing side. We're not given much explanation regarding her character, and it is only in the end, as we mentioned earlier, that her true identity is revealed. Kid Jack. This individual is not technically someone you would call a kid and is more of a young adult. He bears an even more striking resemblance to Violence Jack, but is of course much younger. Just like Jack, he fights with blades as his preferred weapon of choice and is seen during the story helping other people his age escape from enemies and learn to stand up for themselves. He's meant to be a representation of Jack's innocence and good nature. In the end, he too merges with Jack along with Lady Jack. Devil Man. At the very end, Ryo Asuka reveals himself to be alive and the villain Slum King to have been actually just a part of him. He finally combines together with Slum King to take his true form as Satan. In response to this, Lady Jack and Kid Jack also become a part of Violence Jack. It is then revealed to us that they were all 1/3 each of the being known as Devil Man, the titular character of Go Nagai's most famous work. At this point, it's revealed to us that Violence Jack was in fact a sequel to Devil Man, and that the world in which Violence Jack is set was recreated by God after the ending of the original series. This comes as a huge twist at the very end, turning everything on its head. This would, however, be retconned in a later series, Shin Violence Jack, where Jack is his own person. That, however, in our personal opinion, isn't as great as the original ending. We would love to give you more information about Lady Jack and Kid Jack, but there's quite literally nothing more presented to us. We did feel it was necessary to bring these characters to your attention, as they exist and are very much an integral part of Violence Jack. It just so happened the author never truly expanded on it. As for Devilman, well, that's an entirely different series, and to discuss his character would require an entire video of its own, which we'll probably do in the near future. Marvelous verdict. It's funny how life and fate work, because Violence Jack would go on to inspire not just Berserk by Kentaro Miura, but also the famous Mad Max series, which would in turn go on to inspire Hakuro Shinken, or Fist of the North Star, which again would inspire JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which would then go on to inspire other famous works. The list would never end if we kept crafting this chain, so it's therefore absolutely necessary that we recognize the importance of Violence Jack to not just anime and manga, but to all of popular media in general. If Violence Jack had never existed, it's safe to say we would have been robbed of some of the greatest anime, manga, and films to ever have been created. Violence Jack is the first post-apocalyptic story ever told, and dare we say, perhaps even the best post-apocalyptic story ever told. Its violence is so disturbing that let's just say it makes Berserk look like a children's story. If you think we're exaggerating, don't go by the OVAs, instead go find the manga and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. Despite its somewhat disjointed story where the titular characters only make an entrance usually after the event has ended or in its final moments, it does a great job of creating a sense of anticipation for Jack's appearance and the catharsis that's felt when he meets out his trademark sense of justice. For those of you who are fans of the other anime and manga that we mentioned in this video, Violence Jack is considered an absolute must-watch/read by all of us here at Marvelous Anime. You owe it to yourself to explore this granddaddy of the post-apocalyptic genre, as well as the unparalleled violence that's on display there. We hope that through this video we've we've managed to answer some of your questions and pique your interest in this series. As always, thanks for sticking with us till the end of this video. We truly appreciate you, as none of this would be possible without your support. Let us know what other anime and manga characters you would perhaps like us to cover, and in the meantime, go check out the rest of our channel. We cover everything anime and manga, from character breakdowns, lore analyses, theories regarding all types of anime and manga, and much more. For now though, it's time to say goodbye. This is Wheezy249 signing off, but you can always find me on Twitch. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.